Hello and a warm welcome to all the panelists and to all the audience who have logged in. Thank you very much for joining. Today's session promises to be very exciting for two reasons. One, I think the topic is something that's close to many people's heart. It's something that we all experience in our day-to-day lives. And as consumers, we are all spoiled for choices. Besides, we are also spoiled with targeted and personalized campaigns, not to mention the click and collect shopping experiences. Besides that, the session also promises to be exciting because we have a global panel of experts today who live and breathe omni-channel commerce. So without much ado, let me go over to introducing the panelists. We have with us Giovanna. She's an Italian director living in Paris. She's an expert in multi-channel and omni-channel commerce. She believes that customer-centric perspectives and frictionless shopping experiences are key to successes, especially of the retail, of the fashion and luxury brands. Thank you for joining, Giovanna. Welcome.
Thank you for invite.
And we have Harshavardhan. He's an accomplished marketing professional. He has successfully managed very complex marketing objectives in retail, e-commerce, durables, and FMCG sectors. Welcome to the show, Harshavardhan. Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot, Asha. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
And hi to all the panelists. Hi, Carl. Hi, Giovanna.
And we have Carl. He's a Montreal-based retail strategist and board advisor. He advises clients on how to build effective commercial strategies at the intersection of technology, design, and data. Isn't that very interesting? He's also working on a book titled The Great Accelerator. Welcome to the show, Carl, and thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Asha, and hello as well to fellow panelists and our attendees.
So to set the context, traditionally, marketing has been more of multi-channel that has evolved over the last few years. But today we are talking more about omni-channel marketing to improve customer experiences. Today, omni-channel marketing is more a norm than an option because I think it's something that brands have to offer to the customers in order to stay afloat and stay a step ahead of the curve. To what extent do you see omni-channel marketing evolving in your respective countries? Has it already matured, or is it still evolving and is at a nascent stage? I kind of read about France, though, that France is probably next only after UK that's implemented omni-channel marketing at a very big level. So I'm sure Giovanna can share more about it. So if I can start with Giovanna, can you tell us briefly about how omni-channel marketing is prevalent in France today?
Yes. Well, I have an interesting example to share with you about omnichannel, and it's something really specific to the French market. I am talking about Wishibam. It's a service, we can say that. It's a website, but the most important part is that Wishibam is an initiative from a French woman, expert in marketing and omnichannel. She had, I have to talk in the past, she had commerce to go live with their website or something really more dynamic. It seems quite normal for someone that doesn't know France. Why I mentioned that? Because during the pandemic, especially the first lockdown, this company started to help really small business. So someone not like Gucci or Louis Vuitton, someone else, these brands are able to do themselves. This company is helping really small business. So business that doesn't have a website, don't know click and collect, don't know anything about marketing except the personal relationship with the clients coming to the little store. And for me, it's really amazing because this company started to help outlets, so big conglomerate, we can say that, of stores. But again, outlets have their marketing director, etc., that can create a good strategy in communication, CRM, etc. However, during the pandemic and the lockdown especially, no one was thinking about the possibility to sell online. So this company had to sell online, and the outlet had the opportunity to stay close to their clients and to promote their activity. But by my personal point of view, really the most important part of Wishy-Bam is the fact that this company had really small business. And in Paris, the government, the local government, make the choice to use Wishy-Bam to help small local business. I cannot say for free, but with a specific agreement between the local government and Wishy-Bam. However, if I am a small operator, I can have 10,000 euro, 5,000 euros, something like that, to move to online or to use Wishy-Bam, and I can go live, I can interact with my consumers. So for me, it's something really great. Because again, I want to repeat myself, a big brand is able to understand the trend, is able to react, is able also in some way to create the trend and to influence the consumer, while a small shop is not too. So for me, it's the experience that I like a lot.
Great, that's very interesting. But how many small companies in France, as a percentage, probably, do you think have kind of moved into this kind of omni-channel marketing?
Well, reading the result about this initiative, apparently a lot of small business are using this solution. However, also the click and collect is something that the local government is pushing a lot. And small business are choosing between the opportunity to stay close, inter bracket, and use the click and collect, or go live with Wishy-Bam. There are additional opportunities if we are talking about the restorations, for example. It's a mix of click and collect and take away, so that you can buy online, make your order, buy online, and then go to the store and collect.
Interesting. So it is omni-channel in the true sense that's evolving.
Yes, yes, it is. But to be honest with you, what I like the most is the fact that this solution is open to small business, because Usually, in my experience, when we talk about omnichannel, we talk about the big brands that are able to create a trend. In that case, it's really a solution helping small business that are at risk.
Right. Interesting. Thanks for those insights, Joanna. Harshavardhan, if I may move to you, maybe you can share some of the insights from an Indian scenario.
Absolutely, Asha. And namaste to all our audiences and listeners. I think the last 2 decades in the entire retail industry in India have been nothing but phenomenal. So India's retail industry is slated to be around anywhere $850 billion by 2021. And by 2025, it's slated to cross $1.2 trillion. So that's a massive expansion of the retail industry itself. And the manner in which omnichannel has penetrated within the country, primarily driven by 2 big factors: the immense and exponential growth of smartphone users and internet penetrations in the country. While the country started as one of the underdogs, but within the last 2 decades, a lot of homegrown organizations for the first time, a lot of homegrown companies have really disrupted the market towards omnichannel and true blood e-commerce growth. As we talk about, 5% of India's retail industry, which is slated to cross $100 billion, is purely on e-commerce, with the majors like Flipkart, Amazon in India, Snapdeals, Shopclues of the world. And within the pandemic times, this growth has been accelerated, where, as the numbers quote, one of the leading research agencies have quoted that within pandemic, which has been a phenomenal time, 82% of active consumers have bought online, which essentially means that the rate of digital adoption in the country has basically gone up or shot up by 2 to 3 years within a matter of last 12 months during pandemic. So I think 3 big trends from a consumer standpoint: convenience, speed, and safety has taken the precedence for all brands. And the growth has been very secular in the entire country. There are 51 million micro, small, and medium enterprises. And all of them, it has been a blessing where a smaller retailer or a smaller manufacturer in one of the tier 2, tier 3 towns or the hinterlands of the country would not generally have access 2 decades before to larger markets and consumers. Now, courtesy the biggest marketplaces of the country, very homegrown companies like PhonePe, BharatPe, Paytm, Flipkart, and Snapdeal, Shopclues of the world, a lot of this access to the retail network and consumers have been really democratized and really disrupted for the 51 million MSMEs. So now I think the digital empowerment and the digital enablement of all these sellers has enabled them to reach out to almost 850 million active shoppers in the country. And specifically so, the omnichannel growth within the last 12 months during pandemic times have been much more phenomenal. The leading brands, including the Unilevers of the country, to homegrown Dabburs, FMCG majors, and a lot of retailers have accelerated their digital transformation journey. The plans they had kept in for next 2-3 years, they have looked to achieve within last 9 to 12 months. And that's been the big change. I think the manner in which India is moving towards a true omni-channel experience in order to truly connect physical and digital worlds for consumers in India has been phenomenal. I think from a consumer standpoint, millennials and senior citizens alike, I think the way senior citizens in our country are hooked on to digital platform like WhatsApp, and they're very savvy using it day in and day out, where groceries in the country are being delivered at doorstep by the big baskets of the world, right from medicine to all of other essentials. I think pandemic has given a great acceleration for the omni-channel push in the country. And I think the next few years would be really to watch out for. Beyond omni-channel is something that we would possibly be seeing as consumers and as brands. So I think even from the standpoint of larger brands and smaller MSME companies, it's truly been a boon for the consumers at large.
Well said, Harshavardhan. I think senior citizens and millennials alike will also embrace Signal very soon, I guess.
Absolutely.
So I think India was kind of already getting prepared for the digital revolution with all the initiatives from the government. And I think the pandemic only was an accelerator to the whole process. And India was just at the right place at the right time to embrace all the opportunities, right?
Absolutely. All the traditional industries in India, Asha, right from finance, banking, retail, pharma, medicine, and education, have now an alternate digital economy booming up where fintech, education, edtech, communication tech, which is the large amount of OTT platforms in the country, and the kind of consumption of content that has happened in the last 9 to 12 months across platforms, that's phenomenal. So the digital economy is parallelly growing up, and it is very promising from both an economy standpoint and, of course, for consumers to have a seamless experience.
Great. Thanks for those insights, Harshavardhan. Carl, if I may move to you. Can you please share how the evolution of omnichannel has been in your part of the world in Canada?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think the word that keeps coming back and why I coined this idea of great acceleration back in the spring, it was I guess in early April that it seemed clear to me that the biggest trend out of this pandemic, or at least commercially, was going to be an acceleration, and we've just had two great examples of the urgency that this pandemic has created to accelerate a lot of these transformation initiatives that small and large companies have. And I'm very happy to hear, these examples, especially for the smaller retailers, because the governments in France's case and here in Canada as well recognize the importance that small retail plays in the community, and that and yes, we like the big box. There's great convenience from the large platforms of the world, but at the same time, a lot of the community that we need to support comes from the smaller side, and a lot of the consumption that we actually enjoy tends to emanate more from those smaller merchants, and so the great acceleration is played out across the spectrum, obviously with the large players recognizing some are further advanced than others, and looking that they have to catch up to support the logistics, and this part, I think, in more developed countries like the US and Western Europe, as much as we thought there was a really good logistical infrastructure, it was, and don't think that we were so much ahead of the rest of the world. We were caught off guard, quite honestly. For instance, a friend of mine who came from Singapore to head up Canada Post's operations a month before the pandemic hit, had this nice sort of 10-year plan where the capacity of the mail for parcel delivery was going to have sort of this nice 15% growth curve that we were going to see, that was basically going to track what the e-commerce growth curve was predicted. It was nice and steady. And the pandemic hit in the month of May. They were hitting parcel volumes that they were expecting in 2029. With the infrastructure built for 2019. So there was a huge disconnect basically in this infrastructure. Now, how does that play out in omnichannel? And by the way, just so you know, we've been sort of struggling with the word omnichannel for a couple of years here, because one of the problems, we had you've seen them, you've all seen them. We had tons of conferences, for the last 5 years talking about omnichannel, and it was sort of a promise that was really hard to deliver on, we realized, because the word omni sort of insinuates to the consumer the idea that we're everywhere all the time, and we've recognized, I'm sure that even large groups like Spencer in India and others, to deliver on that is not necessarily realistic, for one, and two, I don't think it's not necessary, because the consumer is expecting to find you in specific ways at specific times, in ways that matter to them, and we can keep using the word omnichannel, but let's make sure we qualify it in those terms. It's not everywhere all the time as we thought it was 5 years ago. We were telling retailers, well, you just have to be everywhere all the time. That's the way you're going to matter to consumers. Those investments are the ROI on those investments are really hard to justify. So we've sort of brought it to the idea of you need to be at the right place at the right time. And those channels, maybe it means the same thing in the end, but the reality is the way you think about it. Because one of the perverse effects we saw with omnichannel and just having the word channel going from multi to omni is the organizations were still treating them very discreetly, meaning that the e-commerce group might be treating the consumer in a different way than the physical retail group would be, or the social commerce group might be, and that we recognized was damaging the brands. And it was important to sort of, so the words that came out were more harmonized, unified, the customers, the channel. We've heard all these sort of ideas trying to replace the word omni, but the idea is the same. It's the idea is we're trying to be relevant, and this pandemic has really put a lot of pressure on that relevance, and as we were just saying, is skewed it towards convenience, safety, speed. These are sort of the differentiating factors. But what's going to be interesting once we, sort of get our hands around this horrible pandemic and get into safer context to be able to get out and socialize again, is where the experience part of this is going to come back and play. And there's a lot of discussion right now as to where does that value can be added. Is there's people saying experiential retail is dead, and then there's others saying no, it's just the opposite. People are going to want experience more than ever because there's going to be a pent up demand for it. So chances are it's going to fall somewhere in between there. But the reality is, and the way it's playing out here is, we're, as the others have been saying, it's been very much skewed towards safety. Obviously is a non-negotiable. That's the first piece, and then speed and convenience, with some interesting debate around speed, because there's, we hear different things around the importance of speed depending on the category. Obviously, if it's perishable goods, then speed is very important. But if it's a fashion, or a sporting item, maybe speed isn't the primary factor to deliver on that customer expectation. Because I've been on a couple of these panels recently, and especially with retailers, they're saying, people prefer free to fast. So if I can get it for free in 5 days and avoid having to pay to get it next day, that's fine with me. I'll wait for free. But there's other categories where that's not even an option, or there's categories where you're being pushed into a certain direction because your competitor is offering same day, and you're going to be seen irrelevant if you're not doing it. So a lot of juggling balls, but the sort of the overarching, and it's not just Canada or France or India, is this acceleration where I think executives especially recognize the opportunity to to really push their organizations. I'll give you a great example from North America. Best Buy, they've been working on curbside pickup for years. They've had pilot projects left and right, and the chairman of Best Buy was speaking on a panel recently and said in 3 days they deployed curbside across Northeast US because of the first wave. This is back in the spring with the first wave of lockdown. An organization the size of Best Buy to be able to deploy something that's organizationally so challenging, even though they've done all these pilots, and the technology is the easy part, by the way. It's the people that's the tough part. So to support that piece, but they did it because there was this immense sense of urgency. There was a ton of demand. People were working, home offices and all that were sprouting up. People needed more gear, and Best Buy was sort of the natural, the first choice for a lot of people. But they couldn't access the store, so they had to deploy. So this was a critical matter. And what's going to be interesting going forward, and I'll finish with that, is how this is going to impact your organizations and what the expectations are around change going forward when you're able to deploy massive things like that in such a short period of time and tolerate some of the failures that are unavoidable when you do things so quickly. Obviously, some things are going to break along the way. So to have a tolerance for that is going to be really interesting. So long-winded answer to say, we're basically in the same boat everywhere. It's just the way it's getting deployed. Maybe some people are a little more ahead of the curve than others.
Right. I think there's one interesting point that you mentioned. I think omni-channel to many organizations is more like a buzzword, but it's interesting to see how smaller companies like the Best Buy that you mentioned are actually implementing omni-channel at a very grassroots level, right? Yeah,
because so why this is a great acceleration, don't forget, is there's I don't know for Giovanna or Harshavardhan that there's nothing new happening. It's just happening a lot more quickly.
Right.
All the things that we've seen play out over the last 10 months, maybe a couple of exceptions around digital payment in some markets. Do a lot of work in Nepal, for instance, where I know they had 0% digital payment and they went to 50%. So those sort of things. Okay, maybe that's new, but it was being forecasted. The banks and everybody was sort of ramping up towards this, sort of like my Canada Post example. Now it just got pulled forward very, very, very quickly. So for Best Buy, in their case, what they pulled forward, they've been using their stores as distribution centers. That was a big pivot they made about 5 years ago. So now that this placed them very well for a pandemic without knowing that's the reason they were doing it. That wasn't the purpose. They saw the store as a distribution center. It could act two roles. You could sell to the customer when they walk in, or it could be a DC for e-commerce. So they were well prepared. They did the last piece they were missing was that just bringing it to the curb, which can sound pretty easy for a lot of people, but if you've worked in retail, just getting all those pieces of the puzzle to align can be quite challenging, especially on the human side. So that's the acceleration. That's the piece of acceleration. But why Best Buy and some others have been better positioned is because they already had some of these pieces in place. They just pushed them out quicker than expected.
Right. So I think in most parts of the world, we were kind of pushed into the water, and we were pushed to learn to swim, right? So I guess no country is an exception thanks to the pandemic. Moving on, as Harshavardhan was rightly mentioning, I think the internet penetration and also the pandemic has kind of pushed us all into this digital transformation journey. But what's one challenge that I don't know how brands cope with is in an omni-channel, we are talking of multiple channels. We are also talking of multiple devices that people use. And today, consumers have so many choices. So it's so important for brands to reach out to the consumers well ahead of the timing to make a purchase, right? So they have to be a step ahead of the curve. How can brands actually manage to do this by integrating a seamless experience across channels, across platforms like Amazon or Flipkart, and across devices? I'm sure it's not as easy as it would be in a multi-channel. An omni-channel would make things a lot more complex, right? So any insights that you can share on this? We can start with Harshavardhan.
Absolutely, Asha. So I think the first and foremost thing is to understand omni-channel as a philosophy and as a concept. The large part of the genesis of understanding omni-channel is knowing that consumers inherently are omni-channel, which basically means if you look at our core consumers, they are shopping at their favorite high street places. They are surfing on their social media favorite websites, a large part of the content, and maybe they're consuming a large part of the content, movies and entertainment over OTT channels also. So the way to understand for a brand and an organization is to in a very unified manner have a focus on consumers. And hence, in order to understand omnichannel for a brand as a strategy, it's important to bring consumer centricity and consumer obsession in all the decisions. So I think that's the first point, getting to the consumer centricity in which brands and organizations will endeavor to form solutions. That is first. Second, most importantly, is behind the entire genesis of omnichannel, and of course it has been an evolution from multi-channel, and oft it has been said that within the last decade we have seen brands and organizations, the biggest ones of them, reacting to the entire omnichannel or the e-commerce advent, while a lot of them treated it as a separate channel and hence couldn't really make it a part of their core strategy and values. A lot of them which embraced it completely from a consumer centricity and consumer obsession lens, the Amazons of the world, the Alibabas of the world, the Flipkarts of the world, even in EdTech, the Byju's of the world in the country, a lot of them have been able to have formed a true omnichannel strategy. But now the big part and the big realization that is coming in, and again that comes from consumer centricity, is for consumers it really does not matter that where the offering of a particular brand and organization is. So rather than an internal view, it's more of an external and a consumer centric view, where you realize that your consumers are agnostic of channel, and the only thing that can become a competitive advantage is a superior consumer or a customer experience. And hence, in order to deliver and build a strong competitive advantage on consumer experience, brands will have to shift their thinking in future from a multi-channel to omni-channel, as you've seen in a couple of years, and move towards something which I professionally call as being truly phygital, Now, phygital essentially is a portmanteau of physical and digital, which is very simply understood, saying that consumers want to have the same kind of integrated and seamless experience, no matter you are trying to connect them in the physical ecosystem or the digital. And the ability of brands who are able to seamlessly connect these both worlds together in a true phygital fashion are the ones that have been able to consistently innovate and disrupt and raise the bar time and again. Do we have examples around us? Yes, I think we've seen some nascent pilots of the Amazon Go stores, the cashless stores. A lot of these big basket retailers, right from the Walmarts of the world to Target, Tesco, and Best Buy, have tried BOPIS, book online pickup in store, curbside pickups, and more other omnichannel experiences. You look there back in East, and we have the Alibaba Homa stores, which are the 64 cashless stores, which have truly disrupted the hyperlocal grocery within a 3-kilometer radius with a delivery that happens within 30 minutes. So I think the way the entire concept of omnichannel is evolving and getting into a more phygital construct, brands are realizing that there are two things that would remain foremost in order to have a very strong competitive advantage in customer experience. And that's the only thing now that is differentiating from a retailer or a brand to the other one, that how good your consumer experience is. And that's the part that a brand has to retain and engage with its consumers. And of course, the bedrock on which all of this lies is the ability to tie up data. And what we're seeing is organizations are now being more open to data-driven decisions. They're looking at more segmented and targeted approach of dealing and interacting with their consumers. They're moving from a more straight-jacketed approach and cohort segmentation to higher and granular degrees of personalization. Now brands are more open to leveraging cutting-edge technologies like artificial intelligence, a large part of machine learning, IoT, which is Internet of Devices, and combine the physical and digital experiences for a truly seamless consumer journey. I think that's becoming the big connected competitive advantage. And all of this, I put it up into a seamless connected strategy framework, which basically means, and I'll give you a small story. There was one of these professors in a US universities, and he was very excited to rent a Tesla car. And what he figured out, for strange reasons, it's like really easy to buy a Tesla car, like click a button on a website and Tesla gets delivered to you. But renting it is a challenge. So he figured out after struggling a small website called Turo, and he went on and rented the Tesla. So he got that over the weekend, went to a grocery store. He faced some problems starting up with the Tesla, some problem with the car tire pressure. So he came back, parked in the parking porch and went. The next day morning when he was getting out, what he saw, there was a large truck came in, and the guy was really replacing and going back. He had actually replaced the tire of the Tesla and was going back. So he was perplexed and intrigued, the same feeling when you have something happens to something that you've rented, right? So he had that anxiety and he asked, and what he realized that this is an example of a true connected strategy and a connected experience, that without the owner knowing the problem, the brand recognizes the problem, responds to it, and also gets an action there, which is again a truly connected experience. So I think it's just the start. We are at the tip and at the advent of a big innovation wave where leveraging technology, brands will innovate and consistently raise the bar for a very superior consumer experience. And that essentially is what would redefine the entire retail and shopping and buying experience for consumers at large across the globe.
Great. First of all, I love the word phygital that you used. That's a great terminology that I think everybody will start to fall in line with very soon. And talking of Tesla, I think Tesla is more like an exception, right? Elon Musk is known for solving problems that consumers are not even aware of. He creates the problems and then solves them. So that's what makes him an exception compared to a lot of other brands, right? So I'm sure it's a great learning for many of the other brands, though, to create experiences similar to the story that you just mentioned. Amazing. Thanks for those insights. Joanna, how do brands leverage technology in bringing about this seamless experiences between channels, between devices in an omni-channel, because each one uses a different kind of platform, and some people are more friendly with mobile devices. Some prefer to use the desktops, and some people prefer the physical shopping. How can brands actually correlate the consumer behavior across the platforms and the channels in order to make sure that the customer doesn't feel the transitions? How do they make it seamless?
Yes. First of all, I think that there isn't a unique formula. It's important to read the context. So starting from the brand DNA and from the current consumer experience, the company should have a look to the future and try to solve the consumer problem, into bracket. I mean that putting the consumer at the center as a target, we should understand that today the consumer is looking for something different from the past. So it's not buying a brand because of the brand. It's buying because of content. Is buying because of a specific experience, is buying because several and different reasons. Just to give you a silly example, if I have to buy a sofa, maybe I can have a look on the internet and make some search because I don't know a specific brand or I don't want a specific brand. But at the end, I have to go to the store to try the sofa because it's something that I have to put in my home. I want it's fitting my home, fitting my expectation, etc. However, tomorrow, once I know this specific company and I like the sofa because I bought it, maybe in my second house, I don't need to make a search, surf the web, etc. I will go to the store, but in that case, what I am expecting is an excellence in customer service. So I am expecting a store staff really helping me and giving me an excellent experience. So what I mean is that we should understand consumer expectation first and then play around to that. And again, I feel we as a company, we should be able to understand the consumer, but also understand the market trend and again, and the most important maybe, understand what happens between competitors. Because unfortunately or fortunately, markets are moving really quickly. Consumers want to have a perfect solution now, and companies should be able to not invent something new, but adjust and reorganize. So technology in that case can help, can accelerate, but I feel that the human touch is really important because I can buy online, but by the online I am expecting a quick explanation of the product, a quick payment, and a quick delivery. But the real difference is the human touch, because having shopping is a human relationship. I want to go to stores with my friends, my family, to have fun, to make experience. And in that case, I need a specific relationship. So I need store staff to be able to understand me, to help me, maybe to drive me to the best choice for my expectations. But it should be really flexible and joyful also.
Interesting, Joanna. Your example about the furniture reminds me about something that I stumbled upon about Pepperfry. They have studios for people to experience the furniture before they actually make a purchase, which they kind of research online, and then they can come back and buy it online. So I think they're one of those companies that have kind of moved into this customer-centric approach early in their life cycle, right?
Yes, but also my opinion is that the frictionless way should be about flexibility. So flexibility for the consumer to buy online, to come to the store and change the product, or maybe have the click and collect. So something really useful and helpful for the consumer. And I understand from a company perspective that can be a bit complicated because it changes the habit and the organization. But if we want to move to the future and to be successful, we should understand that way to make shopping today. So really easy and without friction.
Interesting. Thanks for those views, Joanna. Carl, Joanna was mentioning about this human touch. I think that's my favorite terminology as well, because I think no business can succeed unless they have that emotional connect with their consumers. So you can talk of technology, we can talk of product quality, we can talk of diversity, but at the end, it all boils down to the personal connect that you can make with your consumers. And of course, it's not easy when the businesses grow big. So there are brands that will find their way to stay connected with the customers at a personal level. They will find innovative ways of doing that happen, and that's how they'll stay ahead of the curve. So how, from your experience, how do you think brands can actually touch upon this sensitive aspect of the personal touch while at the same time leveraging technology to grow their businesses?
That's a great question, and you know, I think we focus a lot on technology and sometimes lose sight of who the technology is meant to serve, and we think we sort of see it as more of a lever for business success without necessarily recognizing that business success starts with customer success. And I'm happy to hear the word customer centricity come around, which I greatly prefer to phygital. By the way, phygital has been tossed around here for a while. A friend of mine actually came up with that term, Doug Stevens, who's a futurist here, and I've hated him for it ever since, because the word just sort of, I don't know, rubs it. It sounds like on a chalkboard. It's a created word, but it's I understand what it's supposed to mean, and it's great. But back to your question around, I think the key word and when we hear customer centricity, I think what we're really saying is we're trying to build empathy. We're trying to create organizations. We're building organizations, I should say, that are connected to their consumer. And to answer your question, you know, how do we do that? And it's a lot easier to say than to do. But the brands that we're seeing, especially through this pandemic, that have had the most success come from a place where they've been able to create, and this didn't happen overnight, create strong communities. And it's a word we got to be careful, because, you know, sometimes I think some brands overdo it and try to create something where there isn't anything, you know. So if I don't necessarily need to be part of the community for my detergent that I use to wash my clothes with, but maybe some people are really into that. You know, there are, in every category, there are, you know, raving fans, as one marketer once referred to it. But I still think the notion of community, if you're any way, shape, or form tied to an industry that can sort of invoke a passion, then you have a community that you can connect to. So to use Giovanna's example with furniture, for instance, a space that I spent a lot of time working in here in Canada. I mean, we were really trying to make the difference between, are you a home furnishing company or are you a home fashion company? if it's hard to find passionate people around home furnishing because it just invokes commodity, and then it's going to be all about price and delivery and these things, the practical side. If you're in home fashion, then you're touching on something a lot more sensitive. It's a lot more emotional, and it talks to taste. It talks to wanting to sort of invoke a sense of added value than beyond it's a sofa that I can sit in and yeah, it looks okay and I don't really care much about it, versus no, I love this sofa and I think it makes my room look so much better and makes me happier to come into the room. Very, very different. So if you can build a community of people that feel that way about the sofa and engage with that community and drive a conversation, support a conversation, I mean, you're not looking to sort of steer people in the wrong, you need to support them. And that's where the empathy part comes in. And that's true, for me, that's true customer centricity. I mean, that really is putting the customer's needs first to be able to meet them and have a business case that can support it. Very, it's really important. So the customer centricity piece speaks to me to this notion of empathy, and ultimately if you could build community, then I think you're way ahead of the curve. And maybe just for the audience, and we'll close off with that because I think it's a key feature, that's something maybe from the West that we've been able to sort of grapple key on more, and maybe probably large organizations clearly do in the East, is this notion of building your business around customer lifetime value. If that metric comes into the equation, and it's a complex metric, it's not one that's easy to ascertain, requires data and all these, the things we've been talking about here for the last 50 minutes. But I think it also speaks to the customer centricity. It's the core of customer centricity. It's the business case basically for customer centricity. If we can create organizations that use a customer lifetime value as, use the expression North Star or our guiding principle, everything else is sort of boils down from that metric, that KPI, to use the industry jargon, the key performance indicator. If we go towards customer lifetime value, and meaning we're going beyond the transaction, in the moment in time, and stretching it out, and I want to build a relationship with Asha as a consumer, and that I want to be there to serve her and hear what she has to say, make it a 2-week, that really comes to will create community, will create customer centricity, and will build the organizations that ultimately be a lot more resilient as well, because they're going to have and this works as much for the smallest of brands and retailers, and the ones that a lot of them that started online. A great example of this is something like Glossier, that basically began as a blog here. It's a cosmetics brand that started off as a blog, just getting people to talk about what they loved and what their passions were around cosmetics, and then built a company around it. What better data they use than to have 2 years worth of basically conversations to create and finally saying, maybe it wasn't the intent when they started out, but they basically manifested itself, and it's one of the most loyal communities you can find out there. So that's the customer centricity, that's customer looking at customer lifetime value, thinking about community. These all intertwine into, hopefully, I think ultimately, a much better business.
Right, Carl, I think the community concept is a very powerful tool to spread the word around. At the end, it's the community that does the marketing for us, right? If we are able to do that. So that's again, it takes me back to Elon Musk, who actually has built a community of the niche segment. And that's probably why they say Tesla is a zero marketing cost company. So it's his customers who actually do the marketing for him. So I think you're right. The community concept is a very powerful tool. Thanks for those insights. Coming to a serious question, a lot of these marketing concepts revolve around data, right? And when we are working in an omni-channel environment, a lot of the success depends on data created by humans, data created by machines. We are all pounded with data today. But somewhere along the line, I think we are all skeptical about sharing this information when we shop, right? We feel nervous about sharing extensive information. So, but the brands can actually deliver a good experience only if they have the right amount of data, the right quality of data. So there's a paradox here, right? So how do you think brands manage this paradox between data privacy and relevance of data. Maybe I can start with Harshavardhan.
Absolutely. Asha, I think that's a great question. One of the biggest debates globally across brands and consumers, and the most mulled question is how do you strike that perfect balance between personalization and the infringement of privacy? And I think there's a very good example, and this is called the Dollar Store. It's in some part of London, and there is this gentleman called Ben Ebin, and he opened a dollar store where you could just enter as a consumer, just share the last 4 or 5 phone numbers in your smartphone or the last 3 or 4 pictures and trade them for a t-shirt or a mug. So what that guy essentially is trying to teach consumers is a very intriguing fact, example, and knowledge in a very practical way, saying that data is the new oil or data is the new currency, and data is so valuable that he's giving you merchandise and stuff for free. I think that's the starting point of realization, and the realization happens at both ends of the spectrum. One, it is first and foremost most important for us consumers to realize that the value of data is really important. And I think that really gets summed up if we know the 3 big C's, and I put them as a very strategic key concept, which is content, community, and commerce. I think if you look at the biggest organizations globally, they've built on these 3 pillars of content, community, and commerce, whether it is Google, Facebook, or Instagram. So the ability to leverage data to monetize and create a module for commerce is something really important for us to understand. And hence for consumers, it becomes a very sensitive topic. I think a large part, second, which is the most critical part, is a lot of advancement and proactive action and legislation have been done by government and agencies across the globe. One very good example is the European Union GDPR law, which is the General Data Protection Regulations and Guidelines, which is very strict, and they bring in equal liability on brands and organizations to ensure the security and privacy of consumer data, with a whole lot of clauses and penalties which are making consumers in large parts of EU very secure about sharing their data with organizations, and also making the organization responsible and very ethical at the same time. So similarly, I think the same suit is being followed in India. The B.N. Sri Krishna committee has been mulling over the data privacy draft bill, and that is slated to come soon. And I think the way we have seen the e-commerce bill come in India, a lot of agencies and governments are trying to now pay heed to the technology innovation and bringing in laws which make consumers more secure, feel more secure, while also putting a large part of responsibility proactively towards brands and organizations. So I think that's the second big part of it. Going forward, I think the way from a brand's perspective, I would want to put a very core principle upfront is brands also have been changing the way they used to think. I think 3 decades before, and you can't really blame it, because as part of our educational journey, all of us have learned to imagine brands and organizations as the 4 big P's, which is product, place, promotion, and price. But I think now, even from a brand's perspective, this entire concept is changing. Now, no matter what the product or service is, like for example, when you look at Flipkart, it has more than 40 million products. So Shopclues in India has 50 million products, right? So more than the product, the concept of platform is becoming important. And hence the ability of brands who are able to curate platforms, leverage data in a very safe manner with a lot of ethical responsibility within the purview of the legislation, that's becoming a key pillar. The second big thing is the concept of pricing is changing. I think we've learned it from airlines for all of these decades. If airlines did not give different pricing to different consumers in different channels, they would not be able to fill their seats, right? So that's a great example of driving operational throughput. And hence dynamic pricing as a concept has now been changed, and personalization is becoming more important, which means that today I would want to give a different price to Giovanna for the same furniture, and tomorrow I would want to give a different price to Carl, a different discount on a different occasion, to optimize the conversion and as Carl puts it, with a single-minded objective to optimize my lifetime value from that consumer. So I think that is becoming core concept, and pricing is being replaced by personalization. The other two P's, I think we've talked about it. The concept or notion of place is being continuously replaced with phygital. Again, that has a large part of data play into it. So I think whether you think about personalization, whether you think about phygital as a concept or platform as a concept, the only connecting thing is the data, which ensures the brands to remain connected with their consumers, and hence the ability to leverage data in a very safe and secure manner, with both the ecosystem players like governments and agencies bringing in very proactive legislations for which we have very positive and reinforcing examples over the globe, and at the same time consumer awareness towards using their own data. I think developments on both ends are becoming are really fast and accelerated, and I think the way consumers are now feeling about their own data was not the same feeling a couple of years back. So I think that's a very positive change that is happening in the entire innovation cycle.
Good to know. I think so. The sentiments are maturing towards a more practical approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Before I move on to Joanna and Carl and request them to share their views about data privacy in the respective countries, Harshavardhan, you were mentioning about platforms. So it intrigues me, if I am a small brand, let's say, selling my product both on Amazon and Flipkart, for example. If I have to target customers ahead of their decision to make a purchase, how can I use data to identify whether my prospects are on Flipkart or on Amazon, whether they'll be buying here or there? It's not easy, right?
Okay, just to simply put it, Asha, I think one thing I can tell you, in last 9 months, the number of direct-to-consumer brands, very small brands in pandemic times, and I'm sure you would have witnessed during the pandemic times, seeing an ad on an Instagram about a herbal Ayurvedic tea you would have never heard about,
Right.
or maybe one of the smallest restaurants or bakers in the city who would be willing to give you cake, cookies, etc. at doorstep, right? So I think the way now a lot of smaller brands, B2B, D2C brands, not even going to the bigger marketplaces like Flipkart and Amazon, are now endeavoring to establish their own independent identities, right? And two big things that they are working on, which really helps them to identify consumers even before they get spotted at big marketplaces, is one, working on their SEO consistently, which basically means it's a simple concept to make yourself visible. So if you are in a business of, let's say, baking, if you're a business of home laundry, make sure that you try and advertise on those keywords across major engines. So I think the ability to optimize your business, identify your core key audience, and play on those keywords and do the search engine optimization helps the awareness to a very large extent. The second thing is, I think the way the entire digital marketing ecosystem is built, we're very fortunate as brands and organizations that you're able to segment your audience, find who your relevant audience is, and decide your channel. So if you think my audience would be on maybe Instagram or TikTok, or let me tell you the 3 big social media websites post the TikTok debacle in India that have come, which is like the Roposos of the world, the Chingaris of the world, which are the new TikToks of India. And you could advertise them, which have millions and millions of consumers. So I think that's the fundamental nature of digital marketing, picking up from SEO and leveraging the segmented targeting to reach out to the consumers. And over a period of time, you'll see, and I've seen the journey of a lot of smaller brands. Like in the pandemic times, I think most Indians were hit by this full page newspaper in Times of India with Sleepy Owl and Facebook collaborating together. And Sleepy Owl is a very small brand in India, started by 3 gentlemen, dropouts selling cold brewed coffee. So the way I think a lot of these smaller brands and newer startups have built their digital first brands, it's really promising for a whole lot of brands, how they have, with the behemoths of big e-commerce players, reached out to the consumers and did their, as Peter Thiel calls it, completed their 0 to 1 journey. So I think that's the big power coming back to the brands.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they first started with hot brew coffee, and then they realized that logistics is a major challenge to sustain with that, and then they tweaked their model into cold brew, right?
Absolutely. So that's you. I didn't say it, Asha, but you have picked up the 4P. I only told the 3Ps, which was product being replaced by platform,
Right.
pricing with personalization, and place with digital. The fourth P, you have said it, which is pivot. So as it has been said, the fourth P in classical marketing, which has got is pivot, which is the ability of brands to consistently change themselves, be agile, and be open to change. And Sleepy Owl entire pivot is a great example, and that's the big learning of the 4P concept.
Great insight. Thanks, Harshavardhan. So, Joanna, insights from your country about data privacy laws and the consumer sentiments towards that?
Yes, in Europe, we are protected by the GDPR. We don't have so much concern when we buy online, for example. Even again, when we buy in physical stores. So I would like to see the positive part of using data, and the positive part can be seen from a consumer perspective, because when I buy, then I can receive some suggestion about additional product that I could appreciate, or newness that can come available. And for me as a consumer, it's like a customer care. So I understand, or I can think that the brand is taking care about myself, giving some additional suggestion, and updating me about product availability. But again, from a brand perspective, it's positive, because imagine that you just buy something in a physical store. Now is quite common in France to not receive the ticket, but receiving the ticket via email because of ecology, etc., etc. And again, in some days, the company can send me an email asking me about my purchase, if I am happy or maybe not, and suggesting me again something new, or maybe updating me about newness coming, a new store coming near my home. So I guess that data can be perceived in the positive way. It's something like customer care or customer journey, if you want, marketing or selling ceremony. So I guess that thanks to the GDPR, we are protected. So
Yeah,
we can.
interesting. I think that's a good perspective to look at. The customer care perspective is a very positive way of looking at it, because it also helps to re-engage when customers go quiet for whatever reason, maybe because they have found another alternative, or maybe they have had a bad experience with a brand. And if the brands have to retarget them with personalized campaigns, I think the data is probably going to be the most useful for them from their perspective, right?
Yes, yes.
Great. Thank you, Joanna. Carl, would love to hear how data privacy works in Canada.
Yeah, well, so if you're interested specifically, I mean, catching up to the GDPR is clearly set the bar. We're seeing a lot in the US as well, some new regulations coming out of California, Illinois, where Chicago is, and New York. So some are more focused on biometrics, some are more focused on monetization. So there's a lot of catching up. I mean, technology always moves faster than legislation or regulation. So the governments are trying to play. And I was really very involved in the topic a couple of years ago when GDPR was coming out, because I was running an analytics project for a video surveillance group that was trying to see if they could use that surveillance for consumer behavior and analytics as well. So there's a lot of sensitivity around that, and I think we've pushed back, and there's still more pushback to come. What I think the real interesting part around the privacy debate is more, what's the transaction, what's the value, what am I getting? And I find that the consumers are being sort of shortchanged, quite honestly. For the amount of data that we consent. Basically, we don't know 99% of what we're consenting to. We're just hitting I accept all the time without really knowing what we're accepting. What about ultimately, what are we getting in return for that? Is really minute, unless it's a loyalty program or something like that, where there might be some. But and that's where I hope it's going to go. I hope we're going to get to a better balance of a place where, yes, I'm consenting, I'm more conscious. I think GDPR is helping us more understand what those parameters mean, and then what am I getting in exchange? So be it a loyalty program or something that or even more so, if I'm getting relevance. Relevance has a value, and I think that's what you're pointing to, Asha. Your example around, okay, at least how is the brand going to better appreciate what it is that it does in my context. I'm going to need to divulge some of that data, and it's really not going to be evenly distributed. I think you go from basically one extreme, which is Europe with GDPR, to the other extreme, which is basically China, which we know tracks everything and anything for every reason, and then you sort of try to find where that middle ground is, and the reality is that each one, and this is the other part of this is it heavily impacts the customer experiences in those markets. So we use China a lot as an example of a place to sort of track the future of retail, because they can do things that are quite amazing. The Alibaba example, the grocery store is Hema and all that are amazing examples. Unfortunately, 80% of the technology that's running in those environments would be illegal under GDPR, for instance. So how do we sort of reconnect all this and make the customer, let's bring it back to customer centricity and make it that it's, that it's delivering value to the customer. I like also the idea of how do we segregate out the data from these big, massive platforms. Here would be Amazon, for instance, where they'll use in a lot of ways, if I'm a brand, they'll use the data against me, because they'll collect my brand's data that I'm selling on their marketplace and then create a private label around it. So it's not just legislation; they're doing nothing illegal. And
Right.
there's always this camp of people say, well, brands have been doing. Walmart has a private label; they've been doing this for decades. Costco has been doing this for decades, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody's done it to the level that Amazon's able to do it, because the context of the data that they're having, the depth and the value of the context of the data that they're pulling is at a whole other level, which is why they keep pulling further and further ahead of everybody. That's the sort of data stuff I'm more concerned about. Thankfully, there's the pushback to bring it back to Canada. The company right now that has the greatest value in Canada on as measured by the stock market, it's been the Royal Bank has been forever our most valuable company in Canada. Do you know what that is now, Asha? Do you have any guess of what our Canadian company that has the most market cap right now in the world?
No.
Shopify.
Oh.
Why?
Oh,
Because
okay.
Shopify allows the brands that we were just talking about, and Asha was pointing out so well, to sort of reclaim some of this, to pull this back, create these environments, create those initiatives like Giovanna was saying in France. And our government too, by the way, Giovanna, is getting behind Shopify to try to help. We have some initiatives called Digital Main Street and these things where they're subsidizing our small businesses to give them a platform, not give them, but subsidize a platform that will help them do their digital transformations. And it's an ecosystem, but it's crazy. And this just sort of closes this whole conversation with everything we've been just talking about as an example of the acceleration, because this, Shopify 9 months ago wasn't the most valuable company, in Canada. It was still the banks and is the fact that we recognize the value of this transformation and why the market, and as crazy as the stock market can be, I'm not saying it's a perfect metric, but I'm just saying it's when you think that a company like Shopify is now worth interesting 30% more than the largest bank, that we have, it shows you where this is all sort of heading, and hopefully for the right reasons. That's it.
And Shopify has been very popular amongst the upcoming brands, even in India. But it's very interesting to note that they have such a high market capitalization out there as well. This news.
Yeah, sorry, and the market cap is global, right? So it's traded, but I'm just saying the company with headquarters in Canada, the largest company that we have with headquarters in Canada is now Shopify, and a lot of that has to do with India. And let me just say maybe a parallel. I mean, I'm fascinated with India, and knowing that that so is Shopify. They want to support, and we know that the future of commerce, and I've been saying this now for a couple of years, the winners and losers of the future of commerce are going to be decided in India. It's your market is where is going to basically throne the global leader of tomorrow.
Right.
Hence why the biggest investments from Walmart, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook. I mean, what are the largest what are their biggest investments in the last 2-3 years? They've been Jio, Flipkart. I mean, so it's what's happening, and that's why I'm so focused on your market. And I spend a lot of time and publish a lot of things around the India, and have friends like Amit and others here that we all know that are Ashish, who are supporting me, because I think the future of retail is pivoting to India, and for all these great reasons. So I'm really excited about it.
Very nice insights from you, Carl. And you were mentioning about Alibaba. I think we are running out of time, so I'll make it quick. You were mentioning about Alibaba, but that's one of the few brands that does not have a label brand, right? Private label brand.
A very different business model,
Very
and I think it's a smart move, because I think Amazon's business model is going to eventually catch up to them, where at least the marketplace piece, more and more brands like Nike, IKEA, they've pulled off of the marketplace, not necessarily because Amazon was going to replicate their data, although they were in some cases, and use it against them. But I think they just, a lot of, or even AWS, a lot of retailers, if your solution, if your technology runs on AWS, they won't take it, because they'll say you need to migrate to another cloud, because we don't want to support our competitor, basically.
Exactly. So I think Jack Ma swears never to compete with his own customers.
Very different business model, very different perception. I mean, it has its issues. Don't get me wrong, but a fascinating ecosystem. I think they were the future. They still are to a certain extent, but I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jio is going to do in India. I think there's a lot of lessons that the people at Jio are learning from how Alibaba built out a community. Go back to that, an ecosystem, not just around transaction and goods, but around hospitality. One of my favorite examples, I'll share very quickly, that I think summarizes the difference between the two. Amazon, you go buy a guitar on Amazon, you're going to get retargeted with ads for more guitars, most likely. Maybe you'll get guitar strings and a carry case. Alibaba is actually going to retarget you with guitar lessons, which I think is a much smarter, and it speaks to the sort of the community and the different things. And so, because they do travel, they'll retarget you with opportunities to travel to places to learn to get. So they know, like, they have a much more holistic view of the consumer, which is interesting. Maybe again, some data things that would not be easily recreated elsewhere, but possibly in India could with platforms like Jio. So it's fascinating to see where it goes. But yes, Alibaba, very different model, different successes, not the same margins or anything like that. But it's a fascinating, and watch Alibaba grow like crazy.
Absolutely. I think Jio is a big revolution. It's going to be a huge revolution.
Absolutely.
Great. We are running out of time, so I would like to give 1 minute to each of you to share your thoughts, final thoughts on the topic or on today's session, starting with Harshavardhan.
Hi, all of you. It's been a great session at the Bespoke show. I think clear takeaways from today's discussion with Giovanna and Carl is the way the entire consumer journey is shaping up. I think we'll see more of digital brands and digital first brands coming up in future. I think the way entire digital transformation has rapidly happened during the pandemic times is really unprecedented. And all of it is a great boon for consumers, enabling better consumer experience, which is becoming one of the biggest competitive advantage for brands leveraging technology. While technology and innovation would always remain an enabler, I think what is happening is deeper consumer centricity and greater sensitivity for consumers' experience and a better journey for consumers that brands and organizations are coming up with.
Great words. Thank you, Harshvardhan. Joanna, final words from you.
Well, I want to thank you, everybody, because for me it was really a nice discussion, and especially to understand your perspective from your region. And what about the technology and business? Well, I feel that technologies will accelerate business, but also will enable the consumer and everybody to have to do better. From a business perspective, I feel that the future will be less polarized. So I hope that we don't understand again to talk about online that will kill the offline, because we will have online and offline and anything all together, because the consumer is the center, and we have to create the best experience possible. And again, I feel that companies and brands have only to find their originality, and that's it.
Great. Thank you. Carl, final words from you.
Well, again, thank you for organizing this. Always a fascinating conversation. I love any opportunity to connect with the Indian market and beyond. So I thank you for that. And I'll echo what's just been said. And you know, any organization that puts the customer at the core and uses empathy and technology to make that relationship stronger and make financial, environmental, and social sense, then the future is bright for those companies. And I'm there to support it as well. StudioRx.world is my website. We have a Focus on India section where we share a lot of EMITS reports among the others, but we have a lot of great, and Ashish has been tracking some great trends as well. So invite people to come on our website, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to always grow my network of fellow retail, passionate people around retail.
Great. Thanks, Carl. As a consumer, I think we are going to continue to be greedy for comforts and advantages. We would like to buy stuff online, and then return it offline. We would like to pick something in a cart offline and then come back home and pay for it on a click and collect model. So customers' demands are going to be ever increasing, and it's up to the brands to stay customer centric, flexible, and sector and platform agnostic to stay a step ahead of the curve. So we had very great insights from Joanna, Carl, and Harshvardhan. Thanks to all of you for making this session happen. Thoroughly enjoyed it. And you really spent valuable time sharing insights. I'm really grateful to you for that. I really enjoyed, and thanks also to the audience who joined us. I know it was a late evening session, but we had to accommodate people from the other part of the globe, so it had to be a late session today. Thanks for joining in and staying on. Look forward to your support on these shows going forward. Thanks all once again. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Namaste.
Thank you, everyone. Take care, Carl. It was great having you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.